voters have different worries. I think it's important to go around, to be seen on the ground. It's important to be seen listening to voters. We give voters why to vote for your side, your candidate, your party, and not one of the other ones. I try to come up with an approach or a model to win elections that can be applied in any country. And I've come up with the 4 M's, which are message, media, money, and make no mistakes. If you're running for mayor or for governor or city councillor, state representative, the dynamics, the tools are very different from a national election. You need the 3 P's: projects, presence, performance. You have to do it.
Welcome to Train Golkar. We are here in Jakarta, still with Dr. Luis Peron from Switzerland, a prominent political scientist and consultant. And in our previous sessions, we talked about how to win national elections, how to win local elections. And now, Dr. Peron, I would like to discuss with you more and maybe get some tips for our young politicians on how they could win elections. So I have some questions. Young politicians, they need some experience, and some say they are prone to making more mistakes. So in your experience, you've worked with senior as well as younger politicians. What are some of the common mistakes that young politicians do that they should avoid from the very beginning?
Well, first, let me challenge and reverse the question. I think the public should not make mistakes about young leaders, which is they should not assume that they're all automatically better. I've actually seen young people who are just as corrupt, as selfish and dogmatic as elder leaders. This being said, I've worked for a governor who was in his early 30s, and I've worked for a mayor that was like past 80 years old. And I found, and we did a lot of research on that, that for voters, age per se is not an issue. The key really is to show that you are able to do the job. So as a young leader, you have to be very solid on the issues. You should not appear as too eager, but I think I have good news. I think experience is no longer a matter where the more is better, right? Before, the more experience you had, the better. The longer your career, the better. I think now it's changing. For voters, they look at experience as a threshold. So once you pass the threshold and voters think, yes, I trust him to do the job, to be able to do the job, once you pass it, all the criteria become more important.
That's very good to hear, I'm sure, for the young politicians. Now, let's go into another topic that they are typically concerned with. Of course, it's about resources, about money. The younger politicians may not be as established or as rich as the older politicians. Now, do you have any tips for fundraising?
Yes, I think fundraising really comes down to one word, which is ask. If you don't ask, you don't get. In a nutshell, I think it's best to ask for a specific amount, not too high, not too low, for a specific thing you want to do, and give a specific deadline. So in other words, you ask 10 people, say, I need this amount because I want to do billboards, and I need it until end of next week because otherwise all the good places are gone. That said, I think that fundraising is changing. I think fundraising, I always say, like, election campaigns is both an art and a science, and I think fundraising is the least scientific part of it. It's very local, maybe not an art, but the least scientific. And there's an interesting trend I observe in the US. Fundraising is moving away from big donors to smaller donors. So in the old days, politicians would court the rich for big amounts, and the rich would pay them for access, basically. Now the model is changing. There's a new business model or fundraising model, which I call message-driven fundraising. So here you're asking a lot of donors for small amounts, and you're asking them to give repeatedly. So these people, they're paying $20, $50. They're not paying for access. The driver here is emotion. And the key is to ask again and again and again the same people, the same masses of people, to give you small amounts. I think it's a very interesting phenomenon because actually it's the most liberal and the most conservative candidates who raise the most money because it is message driven.
That's very interesting. So about fundraising, the first thing to do is ask and be specific when you ask.
Yes.
Now, let's go into another topic that is also often being considered by young people, and it's about change and transformations. We are in a period of demographic shifts, climate change, digital revolution. What are some of the opportunities that young people can grasp from these transformations that are happening around us?
Well, I think it's a great opportunity for young leaders because they may actually be seen more able to deal with all those changes. I mean, if you look at people like Sebastian Kurz in Austria, he became chancellor when he was 30. The president of France, Emmanuel Macron, when he first ran, was 39 in a country like France, who were like presidents like a king. They were so senior before. You look at Justin Trudeau at the time, was relatively young. So I think it has to do with this fact that yes, as a young leader, you might actually be seen more able to deal with all those challenges. And I think there's another challenge. It's the changing media environment. That is a great opportunity for young candidates because they have it in their DNA. They grew up with it. What senior politicians have to learn painfully, they know, young people know how to deal with social media. So I think it's full of opportunities, and as public opinion is getting ever more volatile, another change, campaigning is more worthwhile than ever. So I think actually the changes can be a great advantage for young people.
That's great to hear, and I'm sure our young political leaders, they are thrilled to hear that age is not so much of an issue as long as you show that you are capable, and second, that you can actually do some fundraising if you have a plan, and third is that young people are more likely to be able to be on top of the changing environment. These are all very good inputs, and I hope our young political leaders from across Indonesia can learn from these lessons from Dr. Louis Peron. Thank you very much for your time. We've learned a lot from you, and you have been watching Train Golkar.